This is the Little Moments Count radio podcast, created in partnership with community radio stations throughout Minnesota. Each episode, you'll hear interviews with early childhood experts on how to support the important brain development that takes place in the first 1,000 days of life, just through little moments every day. Learn more at littlemomentscount.org/podcast.
Grand Rising, Minneapolis. This is your community storyteller, Trill Mama, and revered MC ShaVunda brings the thunder, here with my co-host and KRSM station manager, Andrea, Pierre, the Island Care Bear. And this is our show, Power Perspectives, on 98.9, where we talk about policy, art, building power, and community life in Minneapolis. So last week, we were joined by Deja Joel, who is the founder of Body Prayers Practice, and also of the Melanated Remedy and Affirmation Card Deck. And we also spoke with Autumn McDowell and Julie Graves of PUC to talk about paid internships for youth. Today, this episode of Power Perspectives is presented in partnership with Little Moments Count. Little Moments Count is a statewide collaborative focused on helping parents and caregivers learn about the importance of brain development in the first 3 years of life. Nearly 80% of brain growth happens in the first 1,000 days, and small moments of interaction like talking, playing, reading, and singing help create the pathways that build a child's brain during this early stage of life. For more information, you can visit at littlemomentscount.org. We are so excited to be partnering with Little Moments Count to host conversations focused on early childhood development. We'll be welcoming a new guest each month to talk about their involvement in Little Moments Count and how they view the role of early childhood development in creating bright futures and strong communities. Today, we are joined by Frank Forsberg. So Frank has 30 plus years of nonprofit and philanthropic experience and a deep understanding of public and community systems, with a special focus on early childhood initiatives. Prior to launching his consulting firm in 2018, Frank served 10 years as Senior Vice President of Advocacy and Outreach for Catholic Charities and nearly 20 years as Senior Vice President for Systems Change and Innovation with Greater Twin Cities United Way. Frank has worked with a number of early childhood initiatives through his consulting practice, including the Start Early Funders Coalition, Many Minds Policy Coalition, and St. Paul Spark, All Children Ready for Kindergarten, the Ithaca Project, First 1,000 Days Initiative, and Little Moments Count. In his role with Little Moments Count, Frank is helping design and develop a statewide social movement focused on early brain. He facilitates the engagement of 50 plus grassroots and culturally diverse nonprofit organizations, healthcare leaders, public media partners, and businesses in the Little Moments Count collaborative. Welcome, welcome.
Yeah, welcome to Power Perspectives, Frank. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Good morning.
Yeah, it's good to see you in person here in the KRSM studio.
I'm delighted to be here and out of my living room.
I wish I could be in studio with y'all today. I'm joining you from my home. So, yeah, if we had a clap track, it would be clapping for you right now after that bio. Wow. Awesome. So we like to ground all of our guests in this question. We like to ask them, what is bringing you joy? Today, recently, this week, what's bringing you joy? These days?
Well, what a great opening question. And I'll come back to early childhood, in our conversation. But the first thing that came to mind when you asked that question is I'm an avid nature lover and birder. And so spring migration of birds has been unfolding since April into May, starting to slow down now. So I've just been able to get outside and to enjoy seeing nature, experiencing nature. It brings me a lot of peace and a lot of calm. And but the joy of seeing the creativity of nature, especially in the spring bird migration, is really spectacular. And about 3 weeks ago, I was in western Minnesota on a 4-day trip just to see migrating birds, and we saw 180 species of birds.
Wow.
And even for me, that was just amazing. Just 100 miles from home, I was able to see kind of that range of diversity in our state.
Yeah, I love Minnesota. I think we suffer so much in the winter. But when spring comes and summer, it like truly becomes like God's country, in my opinion, because it's just so beautiful and lush and diverse with the beauty of nature here. So I love that, Frank. That's really beautiful.
Absolutely, me too. I can't wait to get on the water. That's what I'm most excited for the summer and with the nice weather. So yes, that nature, time in nature, so meditative, so necessary. Yeah. So how did you get involved in the field of early childhood?
Well, I'm sure.
What was your journey?
Yeah, I'm sure it's a lifelong story. So where I start is kind of a challenge, but I'll start here. In my almost 20 years working at Greater Twin Cities United Way, we had just regular conversation about how might the resources of United Way be invested to make the greatest impact in our community. And it was working on that question over, say, 15 or 18 years that led me to a focus on early childhood education. And the thought being, and I think the science backs this up, is if we as a family, as a community, as a state, could get the first few years of a child's life really done well, that child would be put on a lifelong trajectory that would benefit him or her from higher educational outcomes, just greater confidence, greater success, and also greater health outcomes. And so that's really the journey that I've been on. And if I were going to add one more piece to it, it was this very difficult and painful realization over time that helping children who are in 3rd grade, 5th grade, 8th grade, 12th grade try to do better is really important, but it's very difficult work if a child falls behind by a full year or a full 2 years. So I learned a lot about remediation, that while vital and necessary and important, boy, it'd be a lot better if we could get that child off to a great start in life and allow them to have all the advantages that come with a great start.
Can you just explain for our listeners who don't know, like, what remediation means? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, well, when I think about it, children who, as we kind of follow the data, might enter, let's say, 3rd grade, and their reading ability isn't quite at a 3rd grade level, might be at a 2nd grade level. Well, then you're asking the teacher and the child to accelerate their work together and to catch up. And so catching up is very difficult for everybody. It's most difficult for the child because they're on a trajectory and they're going to stay on that trajectory. They're going to grow, they're going to get better, but they may not get to that next level that they might want to be at.
So what led to the creation of Little Moments Count, and what community need is this collaborative designed to address?
Yeah, so I'm thinking back to 6 or 7 years ago. I was at the time I was working at United Way and was doing a lot of public policy work on early childhood education, and we were trying to raise at the time $400 million of annual funding so that all children in Minnesota who were lower income could have access to a high-quality early learning childcare experience. It was that simple, and the research was overwhelming. We're still working on that because we haven't closed that gap. But I was working on that from an education perspective, that kids would enter kindergarten just fully ready to thrive. And I had this wonderful conversation with a healthcare CEO who was having similar reflections, but from a health perspective. And so we started talking about what would it look like if we created an initiative that focused earlier in a child's life than at, say, age 3 or 4, which is when preschool starts. And if we combine that with a health focus, and how could we accelerate positive outcomes in both education and health? And that got us to understanding more about the neuroscience and how babies' brains are developing at this amazing rate in the first 3 years of their life, and emphasizing all the things that parents could do, community could do to support that young child would be very powerful.
Yeah, that makes me almost think about, like, can you simply explain the brain science, what that means?
I will try, and I'm not a neuroscientist.
In layman's terms, though, because, I'm not either. But
yeah, well, let's be fair. That's how you're going to get it.
Yeah.
So I hope I do well. And by the way, I'll start my remarks by just asking all of us who are, all the listeners, to think back to when you were last with a beautiful young baby, child, and the amazement that we as adults have as we watch that child grow and develop. And for me, it's just truly amazing that, like I often would say, man, if I were like, if I was maturing that fast right now, dang, I'd be smart. Like just watching how quickly they take in information and translate it and expand. Well, anyway, the neuroscience goes like this, that when you're born as an infant, your brain is about 30% the size of an adult brain. By year 1, you're at 50%, and at year 3, you're at 80%.
That's amazing.
That's amazing. And that's the simplest, like, just volume of brain. And then what's happening inside the brain is there's millions and millions of neurons that are bouncing back and forth between different parts of the brain. And every time they move from one part of the brain to the other, they create a little thread, like a pathway. And the more a pathway gets used, the bigger it gets, like a highway. It goes from a single lane road to a double lane road to a 4-lane road, if you could think about that kind of growth. Yeah. And so the more those pathways get stimulated and used, the more powerful they become, like superhighways. And pathways that get used once or twice or 10 times, infrequent, they over time start to go away. So the premise here is to focus on building this brain interconnectivity that creates these superhighways. And what stimulates the movement of the neurons and the creation of these highways is human interaction. And often, the first and primary engager, the first and primary teacher is the parents, but often surrounded by many loved ones, including grandparents and aunts and uncles and sometimes older siblings. Human interaction. The looking into the eyes, the cooing back and forth when they're an infant, the talking back and forth when they're a little bit older, and then everything around it, the reading, the singing, the playing, all that engagement stimulates these neural connections.
Mm-hmm.
How'd I do for simplifying that?
No, I think that was a great explanation. I used to do some stroke care, and when people have strokes, they lose that neuroplasticity, and doing activities can bring all that back. And it's almost like the same thing of relearning again, like when you were in infancy. What about screen time? I know screen time is a big deal right now. Like, we have our phones. Babies are always reaching for phones. What is the science around like screen time and children right now?
Yeah, and I want you to think on that as we go to this break.
Oh yeah, we do have a station break. We'll be right back here on Power Perspectives on KRSM. And we are back on Power Perspectives here on KRSM. We're talking to Frank Forsberg from Little Moments Count about child development here. So my question was about screen times and like what is the science right now for children and screen time? When should you implement that? And what can you tell us, Frank?
Well, I'm definitely not an expert in this area, but I'll tell you two kind of parallel thoughts that I think are useful for parents. The first is just building off my explanation around brain development. I intentionally use the word human interaction or the imagery. That is what stimulates brain development. And screen time, while I know there's good things on screens and whether it be Sesame Street or certain games, they do not replace human interaction. And so I just think for message one for parents and caregivers and everybody who loves young children, that is a big distinction. And then I think second, what most of the guidance, let's say from the National Pediatric Association would be always engage with screen time with moderation, because exploring the world stimulates the brain in so many other ways. So being in nature, in addition to being with your loved ones. So I would just say in moderation on the screen time is actually is the best advice. I was thinking back to when my kids were young. My kids are now in their 30s, and if you think about it, I was lucky. We did not have phones or literally. My kids were raised just right on the cusp of a lot of that. And our big challenge was just monitoring or managing TV. And we went through a whole 10-year period with no television in our house. And I look back on that, I'll just say, while my kids were a little nerdy or a lot nerdy because they just didn't have that aspect of their life built out, I look back now and it just required me as a parent to engage with them all the time.
Wow.
Because I wasn't distracted and they weren't distracted, and so we just found creative things to do together, whether we wanted to or not, I guess. But I wouldn't trade that. I would do that again if I were going to take another run at parenting.
Yeah, especially now with how much is on TV. It's really interesting.
Yes.
So how does healthcare fit into what you're trying to achieve here?
Great.
And what was it like to get all of the organizations, 50 plus, on board with doing this work?
Yeah. Well, let's start with healthcare. First of all, one of the things we've been able to do over time is survey parents from many cultural groups, and parents here in Minnesota. And one of the questions we ask them all the time is, where do you get information about parenting? And who do you trust? And invariably, at the top of the trust list are healthcare professionals, usually the pediatrician. It's not true in every culture, but in almost every culture, very high trust in the healthcare system.
Yeah.
It's closely followed by parents and family members. And I've done a lot of focus groups. There's a little bit of caution about going to your parents because there's this shift in generational attitudes that all parents today are like, yeah, I don't want to have everything like I had it. And then it kind of gets into preschool teachers and ECFE educators. Well, I wanted to start there because healthcare is such an important place where parents get information. We want to make sure we're using healthcare as a way to get this information to parents. So what we started with is the CEO of Health Partners, which is a very big provider, began to convene the CEO of 6 other big health systems in Minnesota. So that would be Alina and Fairview and Hennepin County and Minnesota Children's Hospital. And those CEOs meet 3 times a year to talk about Little Moments Count and to take next steps in how might Little Moments Count information be shared in their well child visits. So these are all the visits that a parent would take their baby, their growing child to between birth and age 5. So there's like 10 opportunities for the pediatrician to have a 1 or 2 minute conversation about your child's growing brain. That often comes with a free book through Reach Out and Read, which is one of our partners. And so the pediatrician is able to talk about reading, show the child how the book, how much fun a book can be. And this may, of course, already be happening at home, but they get a free book. They get to take it home. And so that's a great way to energize. And then what we're doing now in healthcare is we're pilot testing how we can make information available to parents when they're in the hospital for birth and delivery. Now, for moms who are listening, and maybe dads too, that's a very crazy time. So it's hard to pay attention to everything. But we're getting a few messages out, and then we have a link on our website to a brand new page on the Little Moments Count website, which is all dedicated to new parents. What information might they value and appreciate, all in one place? So we're excited to see if that might work.
Yeah. No, it is a crazy time when you have just given birth. You're exhausted and you're in pain and you're scared. I remember just being very scared in the hospital that I would break the baby the first time I held them and just moving them around. So I know that you're working with CEOs of healthcare organizations. So what about public media? How are you utilizing that to expand the platform?
Well, public media through Minnesota Public Radio, and then I think more broadly now with your engagement and KMOJ and other community radio, we're beginning to reach more and more parents and families in our local communities. Minnesota Public Radio, to give you a few ideas on what they've been willing and able to contribute, is they now do public service announcements on NPR News and NPR The Current, as well as Classical. And those run, I think, about 8 or 9 times a day. So it has a lot of reach. A lot of people are able to listen and be curious about Little Moments Count and go to our website. So that's been really helpful. And then NPR has helped us create a podcast called Early Risers. And the Early Riser podcast was the idea of one of our early childhood colleagues, Diane Halsey. And Diane works at Think Small. And after the murder of George Floyd, she really had some amazing reflections about race and race bias in early childhood. And it's been her lifelong work. And so she raised her hand and said, I think I could do a podcast about how I could help parents and childcare providers be more comfortable talking with young children about race and race bias. And public radio agreed to help her. And, kind of with the logistics of building a podcast. And so the podcast is called Early Risers, and Diane, will interview a guest who is very knowledgeable or conversant on how to talk with young children about these topics. And they'll have a 30 or 40-minute conversation, and we make it available to our broad network. Anyway, I think it's going really well, and I don't know if you've had a chance to listen to one or two of those episodes.
I have, and I love, just anything you can get as a parent. I just remember being very much wanting to know what the new science was, how I can help my children. I have 2 daughters, develop well, and just, knowing about reading to them and holding them. And there's a lot of bad information out there. Like, you can spoil babies. And I guess you can't really spoil a baby. Hold them, hug them. They need that in order for that brain development,
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people that believe in that kind of method. I'm sure you've heard a lot too over the past 30, 40 years.
Well, it's interesting. As you can tell, I'm an older guy. My kids are in their 30s, so I'm closer to being a grandparent. And I enjoy listening because I learn something every single episode, actually about myself, about how I was raised and how things could be and should be different today. So as an example, I was raised in a time as, when I was young, which we were taught not to recognize differences and not to talk about them and to, hush hush. And I think in reality, in today's world, kids are observing all the time and are asking questions. And I just think as adults we should be able to engage with those young children and help guide that conversation in really positive ways.
Love that.
Awesome. When it comes to educating people about the benefits of engaging babies and young children in brain building through reading, talking, singing, playing, what's the biggest barrier? And how is Little Moments Count addressing this?
Well, so we started our premise with the fact that we think parents are the starting point. I've never met a parent who didn't want to do the absolute best for their children. So we start there. Parents are the number one advocate. They're the number one teacher. And then we work with parents to make sure, to the best of our ability, that they understand what we're learning about the brain development and the neuroscience, try to make that understandable. And then we try to inspire action and to get parents to take those steps of playing and talking and reading and singing. So that's our premise, and that's where we started. We just finished a survey of parents who have children who are birth to 3 in Minnesota, and we got 1,100 completed surveys back, and they were all from various parents of various cultural groups. So we worked really hard to make that happen. And what we found is that parents are doing a really good job understanding the information that's available. So they have high belief that they're a critical, they play a critical role in the development of their child and their child's brain. So I think we're making good progress there. We asked the parents if they thought their child was beginning to learn before 6 months of age, and many parents said no. Might be how we asked the question, but we were also thinking maybe there's more work we could do to help parents understand how much is really going on inside that child's brain, even in the first 6 months. So I think we have a window of opportunity there to do more. We have high action from parents in all cultural groups where parents are talking and playing with their kids every day. But we have less action on singing. So it'd be really fun to find a way to get parents to sing more and bring maybe their cultural history of music into that relationship. Like, I think that could be amazing. And then reading is even lower in many of the parents' experience. And low for me is they're reading maybe once a week is what they're self-reporting. And we would love to see parents reading once a day, and if possible, even multiple times a day. And we understand that, not all parents are comfortable reading. Maybe language is difficult or something. And so storytelling is a great companion to reading. So, yeah, you don't have to read a book, but if you have rich cultural stories that you could be sharing with your kids, that's a special moment to have your child with you and bringing new language to them.
Does bedtime count?
Bedtime.
I've been wondering this because I'm like, okay, halfway through the book, the children are asleep. And sometimes I continue to read the book anyway because I'm like, I'm here. Let's read this book.
Yeah.
Maybe you're getting it in your subconscious.
I'm laughing for two reasons. One is, first of all, I think it counts. So I would say you keep reading at bedtime. That's amazing. And then I think you're amazing because when I think back 25 years, I'm the one who fell asleep. So whatever you're doing, I want more of that because I wanted those kids to go to sleep, and they rarely did. I was the one nodding off.
Yeah.
Okay. A burning question that I have is, you talked about this earlier, but about just trying to get children caught up. Like, how difficult of a task is that? I know it's really, a heavy lift because there's such a focus and an importance on, okay, this first 3 years, first 6 years, the importance. So how heavy of a lift is that, trying to get children caught up when they're a little bit older, when they're maybe already school age?
Yeah, so two thoughts about that. First, let's start with the neuroscience. And what the neuroscientists are sharing with us that I want to be fair and clear about is children's brains are developing all the way to age 25. So I don't want to make it's only in the first 3 years and then nothing after. That would not be true. But what is true is the foundation of that brain, the infrastructure, is all put in place in the first 3 years, and it's based on that allows the brain to become its fullest and strongest. And then when I think about helping kids catch up, I will share with you what some principals, grade school principals, shared with me. So I'm not expert in this. I'm just kind of mirroring back to you what I've heard. And really skilled principals, educators, would tell me, yes, I can help children catch up. However, if they're 1 year behind, he would say a fair time frame to catch up is 3 years. And in those 3 years, so let's say they're a year behind at third grade, if you want them kind of caught up, if you will, back at grade level, it might not be until sixth grade. And everything has to go perfect. That child needs to be in school every day. That child needs to have maximum support at home. This teacher has to be exceptional. And the school environment needs to be very supportive. Now, this particular principal felt like his school and his team could deliver against that, but it was still hard.
Yeah.
And, right. So
perfection is hard to attain.
Yeah, and so I just thought, all right, well, that seems fair to me. Like, it's not a 6-month endeavor. It's a serious, focused effort to catch up. Therefore, starting off is really such a valuable contribution.
Wow. So we need to take a break. We'll be back with more Power Perspectives and Frank Forsberg from Little Moments Count. One moment. And we are back.
We are back on Power Perspectives. in this discussion about Little Moments Count and child brain development and just the importance of reading, singing, talking with our children. And all of those things are so important. And I try my best to incorporate. And I'm like, yes. So there's bedtime, which I know is maybe like 5 to 10 minutes. We want to do 20 minutes. I'm like, I got to get another book in another time. And so I'm like, okay, maybe I pick up in the car, just figuring out those ways in which we can use this information that has been given to us, this research that has been done thoroughly to just get our children off to a best start. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us that we maybe just haven't touched on yet? Any more stories, tools, tricks that other folks have used? I definitely enjoyed hearing about the 10 years. I was like, wow, I was really impressed by that, of no TV. And myself have thought, I'm like, oh, we should have cabin days where it's like, we just put everything away and you don't have access to it, just as if you were in a cabin. In those moments where we have been in nature, I have noticed that my children didn't even ask about the stuff because it just wasn't available. Mm-hmm. And I really wondered, I'm like, oh, how are these kids going to do out in the wilderness? But they were really good because it just wasn't available to them. So they did busy themselves with other things, exploring in nature. But yeah, anything else that you have?
Well, yeah, happy to jump in on that, and I'll just start with nature, just because it's so fun, and I can hear your own enthusiasm. There's a growing movement in Minnesota to have nature-based preschools, and that might be something fun. If parents are thinking about what their options might be, to be looking for those options. One of our great early learning colleagues in Minnesota is a woman by the name of Sheila Williams Ridge, and she is a nature preschool expert. And if you look her up, she's written a book on this, and she's a lead instructor at the University of Minnesota at their lab school. And so I'm always inspired when I'm with her, and I will make sure that she's a guest on this show, because she does speak on behalf of Little Moments Count. So she would bring that, I think, to your audience, and just be inspiring about nature and the brain development that occurs when a young child's inspired by that experience. So another thing that I think might be helpful for parents is there's a texting program that Think Small runs, and it's called Parent-Powered Texting. And if you're a parent and you sign up, you would identify that you have a child who might be 6 months old or a year old. So you would, if you will, register by the age of your child. And then you would get 3 text messages a week from Think Small that would be following the age development of your child. And so on Monday, you would get a fact about brain development and what's happening at that particular age of your child. Mm-hmm. And then later in the week, on Wednesday or Friday, you're going to get a tip on, hey, here's something you could do with your child today. And it might be as simple as talking about buttons on your shirt, and that they're round and they're colorful, and just a host of things. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's something you do while changing a diaper. But you're just introducing new ideas, new thoughts, new language to your developing child. So I think the Think Small parent-powered text is terrific, and I would encourage people to sign up for that.
I love that. And it really does help when you think about the development of the child. If you could think week by week, month by month in that first year, and giving you activities is like an action, and I love that too. The website to learn more too about Frank's work at Little Moments Count, and just the organization in general, is littlemomentscount.org. Again, that's littlemomentscount.org. And it says here too, if you there's a texting program there too. So if you text LMC to 70138, you'll receive tips how to make magical moments with your little one. Again, that's texting LMC to 70138.
And just to connect the dots, that is a direct pathway to the Think Small Parent Power texting.
Perfect.
So same thing. Yeah, as we've been building Little Moments Count as a statewide movement or collaborative, our thinking is we want to elevate the amazing resources we have in Minnesota and not build new ones that might be redundant. So in this case, Think Small has this great program. We are their best partner in trying to get that information out and get more parents and grandparents to sign up. And we also work with many nonprofits that I'm sure listeners are familiar with because they have amazing educators within their organization. And we, through shows like this, want to get their voice and their educational knowledge out into the community with, I'll call it, more amplification. We want more listeners than maybe just who might show up in their class. So our friends at Way to Grow and Northside Achievement Zone and ECFE classes, again, just have great educators.
Wonderful. Well, in this segment, we like to ask all of our guests a really special question. First, we lead in with a quote from our Lord, Audre Lorde, that is, which is, "Caring for myself is not self-indulgence. It is oh my God, why can't I remember my own quote? It's self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare." So with that quote,
say it one more time.
And I'm going to say it one more time. Caring for myself is not self-indulgence. It is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. Obviously, I need more self-care right now. But what are your practices, routines, rituals for well-being, for self-care and community care, just with, this work as well? Yeah.
Boy, what a great question and a beautiful quote that you've put forward. It makes me first and foremost think about the times that we are living in, and in particular with COVID just being such a challenge. And I just want to acknowledge that for any parents who are listening. You have just parented through arguably the most difficult and challenging couple of years that any parent has had to navigate, and you should take great pride in being able to navigate through that, and all the more reason to focus on self-care. And I don't know that I have notable new things to say, but I'll start here. I do try to get up a little bit ahead of the kids because I need, I'm thinking back now, but I would try to get up a little ahead of the kids and just exhale a couple times and enjoy the quiet of the morning. I, am engaged in a faith community, so I would have some reflective readings that I could do for 5 or 10 minutes, and that helped ground me. And then I've already shared with you my personal love of nature, and so what fills my kind of spiritual side and helps me be calm is to be outside. And sometimes that might be as simple as just sitting on my deck in my backyard, and often it is walking through my local park. And one of the things we're all blessed with in Minnesota and in Minneapolis is almost all of us have access to outdoor space and parks because there was enough foresight in our city planners to make that happen. And we should embrace that, and I think take the benefits of those beautiful spaces.
Thank you for those beautiful shares. And like all of the words of affirmation, I felt like you were speaking them directly to me. I was accepting them. Yes, as a parent, parenting through COVID, all of those things. Even this morning, I'm actually doing this show, not in studio, in order to have been with my son this morning at his school. They had their field day, and the teacher wanted to invite me, or she called and invited me to just be there as a support for him, because sometimes he has challenging days especially with a lot going on and a lot of stimuli. And so I was there supporting him, and before I joined you all this morning. But yes, thank you for those words of affirmations, those rituals, getting up early before the children, all of that. One last question, because this is Power Perspectives, we like to ask all our guests, what is your definition of power?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is personal agency and voice. And in the work I do, in particular here with early childhood, we try to shine a light on and support parents and recognize their voice, their intentions, and to support those. And you may not see this directly, but the name we selected, Little Moments Count, actually took us 18 months to come up with. And we had a couple of failed names before we got there, and it's very funny stories. But to make it a short story, we really bombed. We had all kinds of interesting things that some communications firm came up with, and then when we brought those names to community and did focus groups with our nonprofit partners, they just bombed. And so we started over, and we engaged a culturally diverse communications firm. We engaged many of our colleagues who were really skilled parent educators from many cultural communities, and we landed on Little Moments Count. And there were two attributes about Little Moments Count. One was, it was a great way to talk with parents. Dear parent, you're doing XYZ so well. You're playing with your child, and you're doing amazing things. You know what? We'd like you to do more of that, because these little things, these little engagements, these little moments are powerful. And so go do more. And so it was a really asset-based way to engage parents. And the second thing that was really important is Little Moments Count translates reasonably well in multiple languages. And so our friends in the Hmong community and the Latinx community and the Somali community all agreed the translation actually landed pretty good. And so that was a really powerful thing. So it's a long way of saying I think Little Moments Count is built on parent voice and parent agency, which is their power to make a big difference.
Beautiful. Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us this morning, and thank our listeners for listening to Power Perspectives. You can hear a recording of this show at littlemomentscount.org/podcast. And if you'd like to learn more about Little Moments Count, you can visit their website at littlemomentscount.org.
Thanks for listening to the Little Moments Count radio podcast in partnership with community radio stations throughout Minnesota. You can find the Little Moments Count radio podcast wherever you get your podcasts and at littlemomentscount.org/podcast.